righty. Well, Chuck, are you ready to come on to the stage?
Sure am.
All righty. You are on, sir. Take it away, Chuck.
In 2015, I discovered an online course about modern and contemporary poetry, which basically, for the most part, means poetry of the 20th century in the United States. And really, to some extent, it's poetry through the 60s, from the early part of the century through the 60s, is what is mostly studied in the course of this curriculum. And it is the formal name is Modern and Contemporary Poetry, but everybody involved just calls it ModPo. That's its nickname and how it's commonly known. It was the online course grew out of a course that was developed at the University of Pennsylvania, I believe in about 1992 or somewhere back in there. And as online resources became popular, the professor adapted to an online format, and it's now offered on the Coursera educational platform. And so it is the most popular massively open online course ever that is non-technical. In other words, there's 3 or 4 that have had more people register, but they were all how to program. They were all related to programming, how to program something, programming languages. So anyway, I'm going to read this little blurb is from the actual Coursera catalog. ModPo is a fast-paced introduction to modern and contemporary U.S. poetry with an emphasis on experimental verse from Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman to the present. Participants who need no prior experience with poetry will learn how to read poems that are supposedly difficult. We encounter and discuss the poems one at a time. It's much easier than it seems. Join us and try. During the 10 weeks of the course, you will be guided through poems, video discussions of each poem, and community discussions of each poem. And unique among open online courses, we offer weekly interactive live webcasts. Our famed TAs also offer office hours throughout the week. We help arrange meetups and insight study groups. TAs means teaching assistants. This is a course that's, I would say it's part history, it's part appreciation, and part personal exploration, because it's more important in this course for you to figure out what is in the poem for you than what the poet was trying to do necessarily in the poem or for you. It has a 10-week symposium mode of collaborative learning every fall. Each week focuses on different groups of poets and poems. Once a week, the live meetings are done via cyberspace. This year's symposium 10 weeks starts on Saturday, September 4th. It's not just a 10-week course, though. All the resources are available online. Your registration in the course never expires. No one will ever kick you out unless you violate rules, unless you behave badly. And you pretty much have to leave it to go out. And that's probably why they have so many people sign up for it. But anyway, so these resources that are available online are always there. New content is added periodically. And then in the off season, people just form their own group discussions and So the website facilitates that throughout the year. There's a basic curriculum that really doesn't change much from year to year. The first year of this course as it is, with the curriculum that it is, was in 2013. The first year I did it was in 2015. So there's this thing that's called ModPo Plus, and that's pretty much on your own. It's like if you want to go deeper, you can go over and do stuff in ModPo Plus. So I'm going to show you what is part of the week 1 curriculum, and it's an introductory video by the professor. By the way, within the course, you can search for things, a topic that you might be interested in.
Welcome to ModPo and week 1 of 10 weeks.
Can everybody hear that okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Of our syllabus. This is Al Filreis, and first I want to tell you about how I think it's best to.
He's very informal. This is not a formal course.
Move through the ModPo syllabus. First, read the poem, then watch a video recording of our discussion of the poem. There might be more than one of those. And then go to the discussion forums and talk about that poem. For the main syllabus, every poem has its own subforum in the discussion forums, and these subforums are generally linked to the text of the poem. Somewhere in there you'll find it. Week 1. Well, week 1 is about 2 proto-modernists, pre-modernists, both radical poets leading toward the modernist revolution in their own right, 19th century American poets, very different in their radicalism. And I urge you to read the written, typed text headnote to the week, which sort of briefly describes the difference in the 2 radical approaches, one that of Emily Dickinson, the other that of Walt Whitman. We begin with a small selection of the poems of Emily Dickinson, and in particular, we are exploring the language intensiveness and the meta-poetic quality of the Dickinson poems. And then when we get to a poem called The Brain Within Its Groove, we spend a lot of time. The video is actually a 2-part video. I hope you'll hang out with us and really get through that, because we do a phrase-by-phrase, almost word-by-word, close reading collaboratively of that poem. And it's important to ModPo for you to get that poem just right. It is, as I say, word-intensive or language-intensive. It is also meta-poetic, and it is modern, before modernism. The Brain Within Its Groove allows us to focus in around several themes that are,
skip ahead
one could say, self-digressive. The poems we admire most often are poems that do what they say. They're about something, and they tend to do what they're talking about. After the Dickinson selection, we have a selection of cantos from Walt Whitman's Song of Myself. A bunch of these cantos. There are 52 cantos of that poem, and we're choosing a small sampling. Sampling of modern and contemporary Dickinsonian and Whitmanian poems. So in a way, Divya Victor ends week 1, but her poem belongs especially to week 2.
Okay, so that gives you a feel. This is a 4.5-minute video, and this is the extent of lecturing in this course. There, I mean, as far as somebody, one person just talking and telling you about stuff. Every week there's a short introductory like this, but most of the time the rest of the real meat of the course is where you work through these resources. So step by step, this first one was the introduction. Then you can listen to a longer introduction. Then they jump into poems, readings, video discussions, and so on and so forth. So this is kind of what the course looks like from a learner perspective, resource-wise. I'm going to go back to the other the document now. Okay. So who is ModPo? There's one professor, 16 teaching assistants, and over 100 community mentors. Community mentors are people who have been in the course multiple years before, really, and just enjoy the material and enjoy the comradeship so much that they volunteer to participate and help all the other learners just stay involved and stay interested and pursue their own interests. So the course has normally 40,000 people, I think, kind of actively involved one way or the other. There's a total of 67,000 people currently registered for this course.
Cheers.
During the symposium mode, hundreds, maybe thousands actively participate in the discussion forums. I'll show you those discussions a little bit. And many people, not just the community mentors, but people like me, come back year after year and focus on whatever they feel like focusing on in the course of the 10 weeks. It's really hard. Sometimes it can be hard to keep up. So somebody may do the first 3 weeks 1 year and then come back and do the next 3 weeks the next year. Again, there's no restrictions on how you want to approach the course or what kind of time you want to put in on it. You can do 4 assignments during the year, do essays and receive a certificate if you can pay $25, I think, and complete the requirements and receive a certificate. That's something I've never done. So how is this different from a regular online course of study? It's discussion-based rather than expert-given lectures. Like I said before, very little time is devoted to some expert trying to tell you what you're supposed to know about anything. What they do in lieu of that is professor-led discussions among the TAs about poems. So I'll show you an example of that here. I'll get there.
So now we have a poem by Laureen Niedecker, sometimes referred to by its first.
I'm not going to play this whole thing, so don't be intimidated by that 13 minutes. I just want you to see at the start how it goes.
You know, some people think of her as writing in the Dickinson tradition, but it's not the first thing that we say about her. But it helps us to put her in the Dickinsonian context here. The poem is very short. Is there any reference in the poem to the poem's own brevity?
Yeah.
Emily?
She says, I learned to sit at desk and condense. To sit at desk, she like skips an article. So that's just been a
right.
condensed
So
sentence.
normally, if it were prose, or if it were a wordier poem, it would say what?
I learned to sit at a desk.
A desk, or my desk, or the desk, or his desk. So why take that word out?
Because it enacts the very thing it's invoking.
What right to do form and content? Oh, that's a high level answer. Can we? Is there a lower level answer? Who wants? That's quite a setup. Would you like to say a lower level answer? You know, Max, what do you think? Why take a word out? Why do we ever take words out to make things more condensed?
You can say it. Come here.
In your life, when somebody's asked
other than to make it more condensed,
I don't think.
why do we do that? Why do we do that in our lives? Why do we do
just
that?
to drop articles, to drop words.
Excessive
Right?
repetition is stripped from the poem.
Right? Subordination sometimes. Which is harder work?
To be concise, it's much more difficult.
Is it? Everybody agree with that? It's harder to be less wordy. So that's work. Already we have a sense of work. Okay, so now let's tell the story. What's the story here? What's this poet? Presumably the I is the poet, Laurie Niedecker. Never.
Okay, I might point out that all of the TAs here that he has at the table are not all English majors. They are just people who have taken the course and have agreed to, you know, because of their interest, continue with it. I'm going to back to the sheet, to the document. So that was an example of the discussions, that the pre-canned discussions to help people kind of think about individual poems. But it's the discussion forums that's the real heart of ModPo, because that's where all the participants are free to ask questions and participate in exploring whatever topics come up. And there's a forum dedicated to each week of the class. And so you can see all of the topics that these are student supplied topics. This is just, I could go in and create a new post. It's just like Facebook or whatever. And if you want to narrow down into a single poem, then, or one specific topic that's predefined by the class, then they allow you to subdivide that way. But you go in, if you go into a discussion, the person who asks the question or makes the topic does the initial post, and then people just reply. It's just like Facebook, pretty much, in that sense. So there's discussions for each week, but there's also a general discussion area, and that's where I've been hanging out in the last few years. There's been a quite active bunch of people talking about Japanese short form poetry. I have sponsored a share your own poems area for the last 4 or 5 years. So this Haiku Corner, I'm pretty sure, is by far and away the most popular discussion group ever in ModPo. Tens of thousands of posts in there. So individual study groups can meet up and study their own things. This is just a way for people to get together. So there's just a plethora of discussion groups, and that's where a lot of people spend a lot of time in ModPo. I'm trying to go back to my document. So I'm catching up with the thing. Anne, it looks like you've done ModPo or been in it before.
I think we lost Anne.
I think we lost Anne. Okay. So then once a week they have the live session meetings where it's kind of a call-in show. And I'll just show you an example of that.
Have an
This video
appliance
always
breakdown.
plays an ad at the start.
Let's go around and just say, while Julia is looking on the discussion forums and the Twitter feed, let's go around to everybody else and say very briefly. This is real brief. This is like almost a yes or no. What's the result of the work? That kind of work that Susan just described. That iterative relationship work with a poem or a poet that then produces this. What I was describing a few minutes ago as a kind of democratic result or a collaborative result. So what comes from it? It could be simply what you get out of it personally. So Dave, quickly, what's the result? Why do it?
It just makes you more sensitive to the way we use language everywhere, which is important. You bring a new perspective to communication with the world.
Great. Emily?
So
Yeah,
it's not
if you
just
see that language
these
as the
people
medium
talking,
of
there's actually
everything,
an
of
audience.
how we
People
Jerry
come
Whaley, he did
that
some
can
good
make
things
it
in the discussion
to
forums.
the
Yeah.
campus
Yeah,
of,
and
keep going,
University of
Jerry.
Pennsylvania in
You just said
Philadelphia.
in reference to Emily Dickinson,
And
the poet is like a sphere
so
with her
they
center
participate,
everywhere
and then they
and his
also
circumference nowhere,
take calls. People call in,
which I thought
ask
was
questions,
pretty lovely
and
and
participate in the discussion.
is
I just thought I'd throw that out there. We don't give
These usually last about
attend
an
if
hour
you're
and
just
a
gonna
half.
read it and scan it.
So,
Like, what are you gonna get? I mean, like this.
That's
So
cool.
that's
It's
an
such an
example of,
Anna approach. You know, like why not do
weekly
that
live-
instead of wasting your
live
time
meeting.
cruising through Facebook or watching a bad TV show or
Or a good TV show for that matter, because I mean.
I think Anna's transformation into a Dickinsonian is complete.
No!
excuse me, I'm trying to get back to where.
I've been thinking about what poetry is a kind of communal yoga of the mind, an ongoing practice that
Something's messed up. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, so those are all the videos I'm going to play, and then here's just an outline of the curriculum, the syllabus. As you can see, the first week they talk about Dickinson and Whitman. Second week they talk about poets like William Carlos Williams and gosh, I don't remember who else. But anyways, Niedecker maybe, but poets who had roots easily identifiable back to Dickinson or Whitman. Then you can just scan this yourself real quickly, and you can see it doesn't cover every bit. It's not comprehensive. There are a lot of important poets from the 20th century that do not get even mentioned, but it does survey several different movements and groups of poets that can be quite interesting. So that's pretty much the course. There's other resources that are available for people. Like this is the list for this year of the live webcasts that will be coming up. So I will, if anybody's interested, I can email you this document. And so you can pursue the links, and all of the YouTube stuff is publicly available. So you can explore ModPo quite a bit on your own. And
Chuck, can you email that to all of us that are participating?
Sure.
And if,
I'll email it
and
to everybody.
at least we can have it to turn it on to other poets that might not be joining us tonight.
Okay. So that's pretty much what I had. Are there any questions?
No. Oh yeah, I think it's really cool. I found it and signed up, and probably try to set some time aside on weekends to go through the material, because it seems like a really cool idea. And you know, you don't really, I guess once you get out of school, you don't really think about, oh yeah, I could still get like literature knowledge from like I wouldn't call this like the same thing as like a college course, but like it's in that kind of same vein, right?
A little more fun though.
A little bit more fun,
Yeah.
a little bit less like here's a bunch of deadlines and stuff.
Yeah.
It's more just like learn it as you go, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to ask as if this is on the test.
Yeah, right.
It can.
We can just sit back and enjoy it.
Yeah, and again, it's up to you to spend as much or as little time in it as you want. So my first year, I spent a lot of time just hanging out and in discussions, and you know me, I like to sit and bullshit with people, so there was lots of opportunity for that in these discussion forums, and I've made some decent friends over the years. A good number of people I would consider friends now from being interacting with through ModPo.
Cool.
It has influenced. It's not about how to write poetry. That's one thing it is not in relation to poetry. There's nothing that specifically says here's how to go about writing a poem. They do talk a lot about what the poets are doing in their poems and how they go about trying to achieve effects and everything, but that's all kind of auxiliary to the overall discussion of trying to appreciate the poetry itself. So, but in the course of it, I've had a lot of poems that I've written that I say are ModPo poems, or they've been influenced. You know, there'll be a discussion going on, and I'll say, oh, I'm just going to do a poem related to this discussion. You know, one time people were saying, can a poem's content not be, what is it? Can the poem be about something other than what it says in the poem? And so I wrote a poem to illustrate that.
Yeah, that's fun. I think
So
that's
anyway,
you
know, there's just all kinds of, it's up to you. If you get into it, it's up to you to get out of it whatever you want and to participate however you wish. So anyway, that's about all I have to say. It's
Very interesting.
it's done a lot for me as a poet and as a person over the years.
Great job, Chuck.
Good job, Chuck. Thank you for bringing this resource
Thank
to
you.
our attention.